everyone, and welcome to Horrorific Chats. In this segment, we talk to independent creators who have contributed to and collaborated with the show. We look into various influences and motivations that bring people into the horror genre. This evening, we have with us Allison Armstrong, the author of Revenants and Toxicosis, a contributor to the show. Good evening, Alison. How are you?
Okay, how are you?
Grand. And thanks very much for coming on the first one of these. So far, so good. We don't seem to have too many technical difficulties. We got started, so that's always a good a good thing.
Okay.
So, how have you been?
Oh, good. Yeah, that's did some Mardi Gras stuff in New Orleans, so that was fun.
That was the next question. Where are you based? Because obviously, this show will deal with everybody all over the globe, and obviously, I'm over here in the UK, and time differences is always fun trying to get these things set up.
Yeah.
So New Orleans, that's quite an interesting wee part of the world, isn't it? There's a lot of sort of folklore and tradition there, and
Yeah. Yeah, we just moved here in 2019 and we've been visiting a lot for Halloween. Primarily, every year practically for like 10 years we visited Halloween and we thought, oh, we really want to live here, so that's what we did and we love it.
excellent. Do you know what? That's half the battle. If you find a place where you actually you feel comfortable, and you can sort of join in, be part of the community as such, or events.
Yeah,
That's
and
half
it
the
has
battle.
does like you said, it's got like a lot of the macabre and the folk history. That was one of the things that drew me to it as well.
So, have you always had an interest in horror, personally?
Yes, I mean even as a little kid, from the time I like maybe 5 or 6, was the only child. Well, I found out I have brothers and sisters I never heard of, but before now. But anyway, I grew up. I thought I was an only child, and I just spent a lot of time in my imagination, and I used to have like nightmares a lot, and I, my family's kind of on a gloomy side, you know.
Do you mean as in pessimistic, or in terms of
Well,
aesthetic?
they like my cousin, one of my cousins. We always like to watch, even when we were little kids. We used to like stay up late and watch like Alfred Hitchcock and all those Straight Jacket and all those kind of movies. And we used to have kind of like macabre sense of humor and like songs, old folk songs about people being hanged and things like that.
So, do you ever find yourself, have you ever come across like one of the normies or like general public, you kind of disturb them a bit because it's been so normal all your life, and being a lover of horror, you're like, aha, that's really funny, and somebody's like, oh.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I mean, I have a lot of friends a lot of friends are horror writers, but then I have a lot of friends who aren't, or they don't even like horror, and you know, they don't understand that there's all different types of horror. And horror is a part of life, I think.
I think that's the barriers have got definitely more broken over the last few years, but people tend to have always put horror itself into a little box of creature feature or supernatural, and that was it.
Yeah.
And it was quite limiting. And maybe it comes back from the old Universal pictures, or like I said, Alfred Hitchcock, although he's more thriller. But
Mm.
Psycho is a horror movie. Let's be honest.
Yes.
You know what I mean? There's no if buts or maybes. But when he does stuff like Vertigo and The Birds and that, they're thrillers. But that horror essence has always been there. Yet people, the mainstream, would always gravitate towards him as a thriller sort of director. Um, it is quite. People tend to have like a set mindset when it comes to things, and it can be frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, like then you think, like I guess my favorite types of horror, if you have to break it down, but it's kind of a blurry category, like you say. But I like supernatural, psychological, and I like surreal horror, and I include things like David Lynch. He's one of my favorite directors. That to me, some of that is what I would call horror because it deals with dreams and nightmares and things like that, the surreal things that happen and can't be explained and stuff like that.
There's been a tendency over the last few years. Part of the reason for starting this podcast with my buddies was we're just getting despondent with cinema in general. Just everything become cookie cutter, safe for the kids, nothing out there, and it kind of forces you to watch things because it's just so easy now to go, nah, I'm going to stick to my DVD collection from 1980 and never leave there because that's my happy place.
Yeah.
It's been a tricky couple of years. I don't know. It's just been
Yeah.
a decline. We're starting to see like this year already. Like we're only into March and flip. There's just been movie after movie coming out. So we're
Yeah.
seeing a bit of a revival.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think, um, well, I think for me, sometimes, a lot of people, say, oh, I want to escape the horror of real life. I'll watch like some comedy or some rom-com or whatever. But to me, I like watching like something dark. Um, if as long as I'm not really big on like slasher movies that much. I mean, I kind of like dealing more with like the psychology or the mystery, the eeriness of it,
So
and that.
there's a mystery to solve, and that's the whole point of the movies to try and figure out what the hell's going on. Um, Usually, like a curse is being enacted. I'm thinking of the Insidious
Mhm.
series. There has to be a mystery to solve before you can defeat the bad guy. Slashers have their place. I love slashers. No, I mean they're a bit of fun. Just switch your brain off, get the popcorn, laugh for a bit. Same as creature feature ones. Just that's it. Especially when you look at the older ones and you see. Well, actually, that's the thing as well because we've been looking at a lot of classics. And some of the effects and atmosphere was done so much better than some modern movies with multi-million-dollar budgets, and it's like, what's happening? I think I lost you again there.
Volume.
Yeah, you kind of dipped out there and then you came back. Here, it wouldn't be
Yeah,
this show.
same.
See if everything went perfectly. I've said it 100 times, and especially with going live. If this show went perfectly, I'd wonder what was going wrong. Honestly, if there
Yeah.
wasn't glitches and bugs, that's the joy of the internet, and we just go with it because that's half the
Yeah.
fun, just having a laugh. But sorry, I was just saying about what I mean, the slashers don't have their place. You were making a point there.
Oh, I guess what was I saying? Oh, about how you were talking about like horror in like the last couple of years have been kind of horrific,
Yeah,
and then people going to escape, and you were talking about like creature features and things you can have like a laugh at some. Yeah, I mean there is kind of like a dark humor in a lot of horror movies, and even like film noir. I like a lot of that because there's always like kind of the sense of this tragic fate, and somebody tries to escape something that's happened, and they get in this intricate web, and then at the end they end up right where they were trying to escape from. So,
that's good. So when did you decide? Growing up, probably like myself, just loved horror, different versions. When did you decide that rather than just being a consumer, that you wanted to put something out there, that you had an idea scratching in the back of your head and just had to get put together into something? When did that kind of come to be?
well, I started writing little books when I was like maybe 8 years old, and you know, even though they were animal stories, they were kind of gruesome because my mother would tell me about all these freakish animals they encountered, and so I wrote the stories about this like cat who had her legs on backwards, and a dog with a horse with a glass eye, and a dog that had a windpipe operation, and they were all living together in this cave, and they were battling against the people who tried to put them to sleep. And so it's the animals that were like the good guys versus the people that were the bad people.
Mm-hmm. And was this for like a school essay or just for yourself?
But they were all little books, and I wasn't even a very good artist.
I can
I would
picture teachers,
illustrate.
did any of this material ever get out? Like I said, I could just picture a teacher having kittens, reading something like that, and all of a sudden social workers are getting involved in the scene. Just they're still as bad now, but I take it that was more of a private enterprise, or was
Well,
that an
I
idea
was
to
only
create
8, so
something?
I didn't publish them, but my mom would read them, and I enjoyed doing it. And then I guess I wrote poetry for a while. Then I kind of dropped off in like junior high school and high school for a while. Got started writing again in college, and of course, in college, I got a master's in literature, so I had to do a lot of essay writing and all that kind of stuff. And then once I got through college, I thought, well, I want to work more on my fiction now, and so that started writing. I mean, horror just comes naturally to me. Like I would say, like literary type of stuff that has horror in it, as well as more like straight out horror.
I've noticed you use a very poetic language. Just you mentioned in poetry there, like when I read the Revenants, it's very, you seem to have a very sort of poetic tone when you're writing. Is that deliberate, or is that just how you feel comfortable?
That's just kind of comes natural to me. I mean, I guess because I always like people like Edgar Allan Poe, and I like Sylvia Plath, and I liked a lot of writers from 19th century, early 20th century. Just I like the cadence of it, and it just like I hear the words in my head when I write it, and it just comes to me a lot of times. It's like it's got to be a certain word that has like a rhythm, or a certain, like, maybe a alliteration that seems like it works for me. So I like creating an atmosphere.
Oh, very cool. And then is that how you kind of, because that was something I want to touch on, because obviously in this day and age we have more opportunities than ever for self creation as such, and putting our works out there. Where prior to the internet, and I'm even talking, even the internet age up to like 2010, there were still restrictions, but I think the social media age is what's opened up a lot of doors for creators to actually get our voices out there, to have the opportunity. But at the same time, you're also drowned because everyone's jumped on at the same time, going, I can have a go at this.
Yeah.
How do you find your own voice? You know what I mean? Like just to see and I feel overwhelmed at times myself, because it just seems to be everyone's self promoting. Look at me, and how do you find your own voice in that world?
Well, I kind of focus on things that I really want to read, that kind of think like it's going to be, I don't want to just read anything. I want to read something that I think will make me think, or it's like some kind of style that I really like, I kind of resonate with, or something like that. And it kind of, I don't know, I feel like my style is already kind of developed just with writing all the literary essays and things like that from school and studying literature, that I don't really get much influenced by other people's
Well, how do you
styles.
bring that out? Because like I said, I personally I do this. This is my outlet, and this is the way I speak to people, because I'd rather speak about others than myself. I like collaboration, so that's kind of my voice. How do you find yours? Like I said, because there's thousands, tens of thousands of writers out there. All, and even though horror is a niche genre, there's still absolutely tons of writers. How do you make yourself distinct, so that people know what you're offering, and come in and read your work?
Yeah, I guess like if you mean like kind of more like a marketing angle, yeah, that's very difficult for me. And plus, there's my last name's kind of common, and so there's like other people that have the same last name as me publishing, and I have to keep writing to like Amazon and people that have my books, to keep my books distinct. And so yeah, I mean that's my major problem, is lack of marketing, and but I'm glad for things like this, because um, it's something I enjoy doing. And I haven't really done a podcast before, but I've done like some kind of written interviews and things, and so I like this kind of
I think there's something
you know
about just giving people a chance to see the person behind the words,
yeah.
chance to get to know you, because you'd be surprised how many people are terrified to see the thought of this wee thing. and going in front of it.
Yeah.
And it's just talking. It's just a tool. Or I've found, like, especially over the last 2 years and having to work from home and use a lot of like Teams and various uh, chat platforms. People who actually get terrified and not even getting broadcast, but just to actually go on camera and speak to someone, there's still that fear there.
Yeah, I know. I have that little, I get that way too sometimes. But I used to be a teacher, and I did one kind of like a couple little book talks a few years ago, and so I kind of got used to it. But it's been many years since I've done this, and I get kind of real self-conscious. So yeah.
Nah, it's all going. So, I mean, like I said, if there wasn't technical issues, it wouldn't be real. If this was all like smoothed out and no blips or whatever, but in the end, it's just a conversation. That's part of the beauty of
Yeah.
it. But with this conversation, you can reach so many people. That's one of the wonderful things about, I think, technology and the way technologies move forward. That we can do this. Like, we're
Hmm.
across the globe from each other, and we may as well be sitting in the same room. It's that's the plus side. I want to talk a wee bit about the negative side though, because especially social media, it has become so toxic, and everything is just pushed into a dichotomy now. You have to be either for something or against it, and I've seen that with horror. Like we touched on earlier, there's this type of horror. That's it. Nothing else is horror or can be classed. There's either the binary, zeros and ones. You know what I mean? It's and I thought we got past all that in the 90s and early 2000s, but apparently not. We're back into like medieval times in
Hmm.
the way of people's thinking. How do you find it? Personally, I find it a struggle, but how do you find that and navigating it as an author? And like I said, trying to find your voice and just find your way out there. Have you met any challenges?
Well, I guess like I said, one of the big challenges, promoting myself without becoming aggressive, trying to find a proper writing group, one that's not like too cliquish. A lot of them are cliquish. Sometimes you have to like have had so many, monetary funds and, publish so much, so many amount of dollars worth of publications in order to join at the level that, decent level. So a lot of them are, you know, and it seems like, people, there's a lot of people out there that are just like promote, 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 and it gets to be almost like narcissistic in a way. I mean, that's all they ever do, and you want to find out more about the real person too. And I think, if you read other things other than horror, maybe sometimes, or if you try to just engage with the world, things that are, happening, like, even just more personal things like your dreams and stuff like that. It's interesting to get to know their psychology, and not just everything they've published.
Yeah, like recently we do these episodes. I try and share them to as many people as possible to get anyone who, the way I see it, someone puts the effort into putting a bit of work. Trust us with it. It's nothing less than a duty to try and get it out to as many people as possible. I got into an argument with somebody during the week. I think you saw it. Like proper nasty about how dare you promote an independent author? Why aren't you good enough to go to a publishing house? And this started
Yeah.
out, and I'm like, whoa, calm yourself down. And then it just turned into a whole tirade. And then by the third message, I'm being called dumbass and this, and uh, questioning my grammar when I'm on a phone with one thumb going, giving a quick response. I didn't realize I had to get a proofread, during a conversation. But that wasn't the first time that's happened. Like the utter, like, just nasty. Like there's people sitting there and they're just waiting for their chance to jump on somebody. It's mind boggling.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, it's there's just like a drawback, and this thing with like have print on demand. I'm very thankful for it to give some people an opportunity that are like being suffocated or being like not allowed to with public big. If you only had big publishing companies, they're all for a lot of it. They want somebody they know can make a lot of money. Again, it's kind of like a money-oriented enterprise. They want, somebody they know, pigeonhole somebody. Oh, they're going to be writing, this is like a Stephen King book or something that's like Stephen King, and this one's like so-and-so. And so there's good thing about print on demand. The bad thing is that unless you've read the books and you know about the author, it is kind of sometimes hard to determine which books would be the kind you want, or the style, or maybe the books that you think have as much literary merit as you want. And so it is hard to determine the quality unless you, like I say, unless you've read some of their other works, maybe Facebook pages, or you their essays or something like that, or what
people
they're
are afraid to
interested
take a chance?
Yeah, you just have to take a chance.
But do you think people are genuinely afraid in this day and age to just take a chance?
Yeah, I
Because
think
that's any book. If you've never read an author before, you're taking a chance that you're not going to like it. Are people terrified of that now?
I think so. I think they're terrified also of having their like authority challenged. Like if they are fortunate enough to be with a publishing company, then they don't want to be challenged by somebody who didn't go through the ropes. I'm thinking it's just kind of like, when punk developed, you had people like forming their own record labels and all that kind of stuff, and it broke through the recording industry monopoly. Well, now it's getting back to the same old thing, the recording industry monopoly. It's hard to find new artists that aren't like in a mold, but you have there again, internet, sometimes you discover just like somebody that knows somebody else, and you say, oh wow, I like that music, or I like what they said about somebody's post, or I like this particular artwork, and they know somebody else who's a writer. You think, well, if they like that, then there must be, you kind of take a chance by the people that like something.
That's actually a good example. That's a couple of weeks ago. There is the first time I bought vinyl in many years, and I bought the latest Blaze Bayley album, and it was purely off the fact of I'm a massive Iron Maiden fan, so that's F Buds or maybe that's my go-to. But Blaze Bayley, he was lead singer for 2 albums, a couple of years, and then he kind of faded. Never heard anything from it, but it was through the internet and interviews, and seeing him this, now, and just how personal he was and down to earth. And I don't think he had much of a chance when he was lead. He took over the duties. It was just a bad time in like mid-90s. But it was because of the internet, because of having the interview and then getting to hear some of his stuff, that actually made me go and buy vinyl, start going down being pretentious again, because that's the thing now. If you buy vinyl, you're a hipster. But I just felt like, I want, when you want to own something belonging to somebody and show your support that way. It was because of the internet, because of the conversation that made me sort of go down that road. I don't know, do you find lost my train of thought now. Like I said, this isn't going to be smooth or whatever else, but just with the way people are online, and like I said, that was such a random thing to fight about or to get angry about. And I don't think this was a writer either. This was just some random person.
Right.
But I've seen a lot from editors. Some of them can be very aggressive and very condescending, and then the same tone they're like, but use me for your editing services. And it's almost like you're worthless without me, and I don't like that sort of tone. I'd rather encourage someone than put them down. You need me to be anything. I think that's almost abusive in a sense.
Yeah, and to just assume because you're print on demand or self-published that you're no good. I mean, that's ridiculous, because in fact I know a lot of people whose work I've read that I think is better than a lot of things that are published, and they don't even bother to publish it. So that's the thing. I mean, I don't think being published means it's necessarily better. I think it just either the person's already established a name, they have people that maybe somehow know of their works through some other channel and they're willing to give them a chance or whatever.
Yeah, I suppose to qualify, I don't think there's. I'm not for one second saying this is the way. There is no other way, because that's kind of the whole point of this conversation. Um, there's authors I know do both. So they're with a publisher. They have their contract number of books they're producing through the publisher, but they also have their independent publishing on the side, and that's where something that mightn't reach be the palette of that particular company, they can still express themselves. So, and I think that's the point, or what I would like to discuss is why do people, why have people got so ingrained now that it's either one way or the other? Why are they stuck in that mindset when we're in an
Well,
age where the stars should be the limit?
why did they get so upset? I think, well, I think it's just maybe frustration that because there's so many things out there and it's almost gets overwhelming. Like which, unless you've heard of the book through like a trusted friend or something, you just don't know what to decide. And this may seem a little negative, but sometimes, people who endlessly promote their books and they're it's like self-published or something. And then I see excerpts from their books and it's like run-on sentences galore, it's like and their descriptions are like cliched or whatever. And I think because there's like a few, I'm not saying they're the majority by any means, but because there's like some people out there, maybe the person sees one person like that and they think, oh, everybody who's self-published, they don't know grammar, they don't care, they just want to, whatever. So
So, do you
that's
think
the
it's a
problem.
reaction to information overload? So,
Yeah, information only, yeah.
is there an argument to be made for some sort of gatekeeping, or is there maybe a way that the audience should be more discerning, or a way to encourage them to see? Like what we try to do here is obviously we perform a short piece, so 10, 15, not even like 15 minutes, but there's an excerpt from a story or a short story. There's an example of somebody's work just put in audio form with a wee bit of
Hmm.
dramatization, but you're getting the example. So if you want to check out any of our authors, they're there, and then the links, obviously you can go and follow them. Like yourself, your links are in the description of this episode. You know what I mean? More an opportunity to look at your work. Is this the way forward, or is there something else that needs to be done to maybe convince the audience to give things a try, or to let them see? Because that's a bit I struggle with, or I'm trying to find ways around.
Um, yeah, okay. I think one way to do it is like you saying, having these kind of episodes where people get to hear the work and a little excerpt of the work and see if it's, they like the theme or the style or the subject matter. Another way is I'm glad there's like a lot of, I look at open calls. I try to get some submissions in. And if you get a short story published somewhere and then you find out about other people who are getting in the same, then it kind of opens it up and it gives you a chance to see what other people are writing. And then maybe you want to say, oh, I've seen things on Facebook, maybe, oh, I that person, I love what they wrote here. I've seen a little excerpt of their novel. So their Facebook friend and, whatever, they seem insightful. I like the subject matter. I'm going to buy that book, you know?
Good, yeah, because it's like I said, I don't like the nastiness. I think it's exhausting, and the almost reaction that, oh, here's somebody doing something different. I don't like this, and independent publishing's been around for long enough now, and there's even like we've got the main publishing houses. There'll always be Penguin Books. There'll always be HarperCollins. You know, they'll kind of last as long as there's bookstores. But we're now seeing like smaller independent publishers as well. So there's a bit of a helping hand too. How important is networking? That's
I
some,
think it's, I think it's very important. And I think it's important to, I know, like, friends of friends of friends, um, and not just with authors. I mean, some of the people that I've um, gotten to know on Facebook who've actually helping discover other authors, and they're not even authors. Maybe they're artists or they're musicians or something like that, theater, whatever, music, and they become mutual friends and that kind of thing. And like, for instance, or even just a mutual interest group. I mentioned David Lynch before. I'm in like this big David Lynch group, and there's like a lot of really tremendously creative people in there in all different fields, artists and musicians and writers and people who are doing like independent films, and you discover a lot of people in there, and so it's like you got your own little community there, and you have that with other things too.
It's good. It's just I suppose the balances are trying to go the other side that it doesn't become cliquish. Like you mentioned with some of the groups, you start getting a group in, they want to run the show, it almost becomes their whole world. Like, how important is it? Because it's so easy with this, as a creative, just to delve in, and like I said, you've seen so many people, and 100% of their time spent self-promoting, that becomes their entire focus. How do you achieve balance between your creative efforts and getting yourself known and having a personal life and actually enjoying the online experience? Because I think there's too many people don't enjoy social media anymore. It's become a compulsion and a method of power where maybe they're replacing something empty in their lives. How do you navigate that yourself?
Well, I try to discipline myself. Like, for instance, instead of looking at the news,
Right, Alison, you've just dipped out again. Try not to look at the news, so hopefully you'll. Yep, read in just a second. Gotta love technology.
friends always have really interesting things to say, so I'm going to look at more of their posts. And some people, I just want to make sure nothing horrible happened in their lives, or whatever. Just kind of check up on them every once in a while, and so I kind of do that. And then I devote, like, fortunately, I'm kind of retired now from my regular jobs, but I devote myself to writing a certain amount of hours per day if I can, and then I try to limit my TV watching on just certain hours, and that kind of thing. So and I don't like have text alerts. I don't have things like dinging and interrupting my private time.
The first alarm went off was for this, and it's like one of the few alarms, apart from the morning, it goes off, and I'm like, what's this? Because I switch off all notifications. I hate constantly being buzzed. It's almost as if something's ruining your life. Like, leave me alone. I'll decide what I want to do, damn it. So is self-discipline like really important?
Yes, it is. Because I know you can be overwhelmed. Like sometimes I think, oh, I didn't check up on that person today. Oh, what if something horrible happened in their life and I'm going to be a bad friend or whatever like that. So it's like I have to calm myself. Okay, well, do you check up on them tomorrow or whatever? It can be a compulsion. Yeah.
Yeah, my friends know they mightn't hear from me for weeks or months. It's just part of it. Yeah. I have the same type of friends who, we mightn't talk to each other for like 6 months. Doesn't mean we're not friends anymore. I would go and have a pint tomorrow and pick up the conversation from where it was. So I think the type of people as well you have in your life is a factor.
And also, I don't know how some people can have like thousands of friends. I don't know how they can keep track of them all, and do any kind of interaction at all with them.
No, it's 104. God, I forget the name of the law. There's a rule that you basically can't interact with more than 140 people. That's your whole circle of life, effectively. Once it goes outside that, they become ineffectual relationships. So those 140 people make up your work, your family, your close friends, and then as the circle widens out, that's where it becomes less relevant. And you're always managing that circle. People might fall to the outside and might come back to the centre again, but it's having that core focus. If I was clever, I would remember the name of the law, but it's gone out of my head.
Yeah,
But that kind of rule of thumb.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, sometimes I get really frustrated with social media. I thought, oh, I wish it wasn't even invented, but I have to, and I have cousins and things that just like, oh, I don't want to go on Facebook, blah 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 blah. But because of Facebook, I've met a lot of creative people, and I've been inspired. I've had opportunities I never would have had. I mean, I would have been pretty isolated. Sometimes it's hard to make friends in real life, especially with well,
The
COVID and
last two and a
everything going
half years, just
on. And we just moved to New Orleans and right before COVID basically. And I've met some through I did know some people here, and then I've met some through other people on social media. So it helps when you're locked in that you have social media.
oh, absolutely. Like for myself, I'm living just in the outskirts of London, just in one of the outer boroughs, but um, moved here a couple of years ago just before this all hit. And if it wasn't for social media, you'd be sitting staring at four walls going, what? And being distracted. Also, as well, I think we'll touch on this at the very start. Horror is a niche genre. And when you're in the bubble, so to speak, it's hard to imagine that there's people outside that are terrified. Like I think you become desensitized. Like when I'm watching movies, I'm not looking to be. I'd love to be scared again. Maybe fantastic.
Yeah.
You might get the odd jump scare, but generally it's like, that was done wrong. That was right. That was funny. But there's people actually terrified, and it's hard to imagine sometimes that those people exist because, especially in social media, when you find your group, or also out in the real world, if you're making jokes and people are like horrified at you
Yeah,
when you're showing
like,
like
I
gallows
know.
humor.
Yeah, I mean, I have like kind of a dark humor, and people in my family get it, close friends get it, but other people, it's like, oh my God, if they heard it, just slips into my head that way, and
Yeah, and that's where like I said, I love the benefits of social media and the internet, that you have the opportunity to find like-minded people. We wouldn't have been able to do this right now as we're sitting without social media. It's a powerful tool. It's just a shame sometimes people think they have to own it, and they think that they're the arbiter, and only their view or only their interests and likes can be aired. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, we talked about special interest groups, that a lot of them are getting shut down because of people complaining, or the Facebook algorithms picking it up. So there's actually
Mhm.
people purposely get into these groups to take offence and report them and get them shut
Yeah,
down. And I never understood that mentality.
yeah, I don't either. I mean, I think the only thing I would like probably, really be like concerned about on was, anything like hurting animals or hurting real life people or something like that, that would be something to report. But if somebody says something you don't like and they keep saying it over and over and it's really like offensive to you, either you unfriend the person, maybe you contact them first and say, this is like racist or whatever, and or you just like you don't have anything to do with them, but not not just like tattle on them all the time.
Yeah, but there's these people, like I said, if you see a group and it's called horror, you've kind of got an idea that there's going to be disturbing, because to me, that's the essence of horror. Not so
Yeah,
much the genre, but the unsettling feeling. Horror is
right. I
that
mean,
unsettling feeling where you don't feel secure as a person anymore. That's what horror is meant to do. It's meant to shake you up, and you're no longer the alpha predator. There's something bigger out there, even if it's yourself, which you talked about, sort of warped reality, and some of my favorite tropes are, like the unbending mind, or you don't know if the character's losing the plot or if this is actually happening, and that's kind of what you're trying to piece together, the clues. That's what horror's about. So somebody to come from the outside into that, and then effectively, I'm getting in there to get offended and report people because they're making dark humor jokes, or
yeah,
they're looking like, dark humor is, especially in trying times, that's always been a coping mechanism. Soldiers humor, gallows humor, black humor. You know, it's got so many names, but it's the same thing. It's one of the best coping mechanisms to actually laugh at something because your body doesn't know what else to do. You're faced with something insurmountable. It's taking you over. You could be the end of your life. So the only thing to do is go ha ha, because at least that way you've still got some control left. And it seems to be this whole thing online which is ruining the very thing that it was set up not to be. I just find it really
Yeah.
frustrating.
Well, I mean, you think of like you know, great, like from mythology on. I mean, there's always been like gruesome things. There's been like incest. There's been cannibalism. Things like that. And so I don't know why now certain things are off limits. As long as it's like fiction and you're not doing it to some unwilling person or animal in real life. I mean, it's just a story. It's just fiction. It's maybe depending on, also depends on like it there's so many other things that were once taboo, and like I say, William Burroughs and stuff, and that kind of thing. I mean, as a literature major, at least I had the chance to read a lot of things that maybe now people would object to and try to ban or whatever. And I'm glad I got a chance to be exposed to all that stuff. And as a kid, watching horror movies, and nobody seemed to care that I was watching them.
No, same as myself. I loved it. Obviously, back in the day, I had only four channels, and then it was like Saturday night was the horror movies.
Hmm.
My favorite of all times, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. That's just an absolute mishmash of comedy, horror, and Boris Karloff and everything. Just because that was the thing. The old black and white movies, used to watch those religiously, loved them, and uh, I would laugh, but then I heard that kids would have nightmares watching that stuff, even back in the day, and you're like, really? Where did it go wrong? Or where did this culture... Because everything has been about expansion and progression. At what point... Is it because of the information overload? Or the fact that anything's on the table? Are people trying to censor themselves? Is that just trying to dial back from overload? Is that where this is maybe coming from?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe. Yeah, probably maybe they don't examine their own thoughts very much. I mean, I've always been very interested in psychology, like especially depth psychology, things like Jungian psychology with the shadow and all that kind of stuff. And then, things with doppelganger, themes of that, like Jekyll and Hyde. And a lot of people just don't want to look within, they want to categorize, this is good, this is bad, instead of saying it's an aspect of yourself,
And that is the essence of horror. Like I said, that
Yeah.
uncomfortable feeling. That's why there's so many genres, because there's so many ways to generate that feeling
Mm-hmm.
that they just shake you, make you go, "Oh my word, can that actually happen?" It's just. I wonder where this fear came from, because it just seemed to be that, like myself growing up, everything was moving forward, and everything was
Yeah.
about pushing the boundary of yourself. Or maybe it was just the way I had an outlook, and I didn't
No,
really notice
I
other people.
agree. Yeah, yeah. Somehow it got repressive again, and I don't really know why. I think maybe it's just because social media got to be so big and everybody's using it, and of course there's always going to be some people that are offended by everything, and maybe they were never exposed to anything challenging as a child or whatever.
Do you think horror is a good thing for children?
Yeah, I do. I mean, like I watched it as a child. I mean,
Never did me any harm.
I don't know. Well, I mean, as a child, I have to say my grandmother used to come up with some very scary things that she would tell me. She would say like, "Oh, don't go out in the road. You're going to be smashed flatter than a pancake, and we'll never be able to put you back together again." And I was like, "Oh, wow." I mean, that her words or descriptions. It's better than any physical punishment. I mean, I can imagine all these things. So, you think of the fairy tales, and they always have these really gruesome things that a lot of people would find terribly offensive nowadays. And
But there were generally
yeah,
warnings. It was the original form of, I wouldn't say morality. There's obviously hints of morality, but it's more about like Red Riding Hood. Don't go off the beaten path. You know what I mean? That's
yeah,
because you'll lose yourself and you don't know what's out there. Hansel and Gretel always find their way home. Careful who you trust. You know what I mean? All the grim fairy tales. Oh, did you lose me? I think you've dipped out
I
again.
can't hear you.
All right, I couldn't hear you back.
I have to do this little sign
Yeah, that's
language.
that's why I kind of stopped there. I'm like, oh right, and then but then nothing was coming through. God, I love technology. It's so much fun. So I was saying about like the grim fairy tales, Red Riding Hood, don't stray off the beaten path. It was a warning to like know where you're going. Hansel and Gretel always be able to find your way home, know who you can trust. These were like the earliest forms of warning and not necessarily morality but survival. And the use
Hmm.
of horror has always been that to make you look inside as well because by being self-aware, being aware of dangers but not being overwhelmed by it, then you could function. So do you think it's kind of hiding young people? Like it seems to be this generation of like 25 to 35 are are the worst culprits who just seem to be so wrapped in cotton wool that everything shakes their world now.
Yeah, I think well maybe part of this backlash thing is because things in the real world have suddenly, well not suddenly, progressively become more horrible. People retreat from any kind of depiction of it in fantasy. And I mean, it's almost like they think, oh, if I don't read about it, it's not going to happen or something, you know. Um, I mean, a lot of things that happen in the news, I keep thinking, oh, it sounds so much like a horror story. You know what I mean? Like you just wouldn't believe it actually happened, but it did. So maybe that's the fear of what's actually happening, and they're just not facing it or something.
Strange, but yet the actual answer would be to read more because, for example, serial killers would be a good example. Knowing the patterns or how they stalk their victims, if you read about it, then you can be wary yourself of, okay, maybe not going down that
Mm-hmm.
dark alley with no street lights at 2 a.m. in the morning is not the best idea. Or going to the car park, parking your car right at the very end in the isolated bit under the bushes is not the best of ideas because I've read 50 stories about how somebody always jumps out from the bush or that's where you get disappeared. Do you know what I mean? Do you think they're actually doing more harm to themselves than by shutting themselves away? And then the cycle is just repeating even further.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it is very practical suggestions. I mean, yeah, I guess maybe because I watched horror movies as a kid and my grandmother always scared me. Maybe I was very cautious. I know you don't do this, you be very careful, always be aware of your surroundings, all that kind of stuff. Be wary of who you get in a car with, or blah, 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 blah. And yeah, a lot of people aren't careful. And maybe if they watch more horror movies, they would
Could
be.
save your life, you never know. Actually, one of like my first horror movies, like Nightmare on Elm Street, absolute fan of that series. But the underlying message between all those movies, even though they got like comedy and cheesy towards the end, was always know your own fears and know yourself. And the minute you conquered those, you conquered Freddy. So there's always a subtle message woven in there of, if you let your fear take over, you're done. Which is the
Hmm.
basics for life. The minute you can have fear is a useful tool. Feeling uncomfortable is a useful tool because if you feel that bump, you know something's not right. If you're walking into a situation with a group of people and all of a sudden they're going quiet, you get that vibe, you know not to be there anymore. There's something not right. So,
Yeah.
in essence, by shutting themselves off, I think these poor folk are actually putting themselves in more harm and making themselves more susceptible.
Right. And also, like if I shutting off any kind of dark thoughts that they would have, I think those things are more likely to fester inside. Like, for instance, one thing, sometimes when I'm like depressed or whatever, and I watch a movie, it has like a real, like this bitter irony at the end, it really kind of makes me happy because it's like all about this person. They didn't want, like film noir sometimes,
Mhm.
like Nightmare Alley. I don't know if you ever saw that,
Yeah,
the
actually,
new
we
one.
just talked about that 2 weeks ago.
You talked about that?
Yeah, we did it. No, Cameron and I talked about it. Went to see it in the
Oh,
cinema.
wow. Okay, I saw the movie recently, but yeah, the ending was like, I'm not going to tell about the ending, but it was just so perfect because it was all like this little seed was planted all throughout, and it's like, yeah, it's like I was really happy because I mean, it's kind of laughing in a morbid way because
Yeah, because if it had went differently, there'd be no moral story. I'll put the link in the description for our conversation because we do spoil it if you want to go there. But Bradley Cooper, he's an underrated actor. I was talking about that as well. He transformed into his character and he's barely recognizable.
Who's this?
Bradley Cooper, the main actor,
Oh,
he played
yes,
Stanton.
yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe he was even in those other movies. It was like, yeah, he looks
That's
so
that's a
different.
sign of a good
Yeah,
actor.
yeah, yeah. I've seen some of his other movies, and I was like surprised that was in him. And that was, yeah, it was excellent. And I mean, that's technically not horror, but then again, you think of tragedies like Oedipus Rex. I mean, you could make it into a horror movie.
Like, I don't know. There was once again, it's about that uncomfortable feeling, and this was basically about somebody's own narcissism, and their journey along it. Oh, give me the thumbs up when we're ready. I'll just keep talking for the audience. Nah, we're once again we've done quite well though. We're nearly an hour in, and
I can't
oh,
hear
back again.
you.
Yep. Sorry, I said just I was just talking for the audience, obviously. Just well, we'll resync back up again. I'd say we've done quite well for a live stream that been
Yeah, it
going
is.
going quite well. So I was saying, like the whole idea of horror, once again, that uncomfortable feeling, looking inside. This was somebody who didn't look inside, and that was the whole
Yeah,
driving narrative of the story.
yeah. Yeah, I did because it, kind of cathartic, it's like, I guess it's like you brought up something I thought was fascinating, like how people like to think they're in control of everything, right? Humans are in control. The whole thing of fate, like in the Greek tragedies and stuff, you're not in control. And in my books, it's like, like my vampires and other supernatural characters, I kind of like the fact that envisioning some kind of other type of being that is at the top of the food chain. It's the humans. Humans have so much uh, egotism. They think, oh, we can control everything. And sometimes I really like it when there's some other creature and they just smash the humans,
I'm
teach
a
them a
massive
lesson.
fan of Godzilla and the Kaiju movies. Like Pacific
Yeah.
Rim and that. I actually think that would solve the world's problems if there
Yeah.
was an apex predator, a guy who just materialized, and it didn't matter whether you're rich, poor, it would just materialize either in a city or out in the sticks. There was nowhere safe, and just randomly, every couple of years, just munch down a few humans
Yeah.
and just put us back in their place. And then we kind of had a moment to reflect, go, okay, that could be me next. I'm going to squeeze every drop out of this life because you never know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's humbling. And it's like people, I mean, I think, the thing is too, it's like if I would have thought that things like COVID would have taught us that we're not, we're not, we can't control everything. We could, do good things with the vaccines and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, there's always going to be something mysterious, unknown that we can't control, and we have to be a little humble sometimes, and respect other forms of life and respect the planet and all that kind of thing. And
I think part of the problem with the last 2 years was there was no internal reflection. So the people that were supposedly leading us suffer from that narcissism and don't have that internal reflection, and they're all part of the game and about winning the game, and not actually about this isn't good, or they're not thinking long term. They're just thinking, I'm going to be in this position of power for X number of years, or I've now been elevated because of the situation. I'm going to milk as much of this as possible, and then that's where everything went completely sideways. And once again, everyone jumped into the dichotomy. There was no nuance of conversation. Everything was either you're right or you're wrong, or if you don't agree with this, you're a bad person, or if you're on that side, you do. And that's not how you. That's not how you convince people. That's how you get people on board. In fact, that's how you get more antagonism.
Yeah.
And then back to what we're
People,
saying, it's into every aspect of life.
it's like I think sometimes there's like, it's almost like there's like some kind of mental like mass delusion or something. Something's infected humanity, that people like just rioting like over nothing, just like over whether or not to wear masks, or like something happened in Pennsylvania. Some people had like a human stampede in a steakhouse of all things because somebody got their steak first or whatever, and it was like a mass brawl. People throwing tables and chairs, and I mean, it was like if it was a movie, it would be like a comedy, but it was
You think
real
it was too
life.
far fetched? If you handed that script in or that novel and the publisher, they'd be like, "Are you mad? That would never happen." You're like, "No, this is actually just transcripts of the news. This is going on right now." But we're not at that level of. I don't know. Maybe there's a yearning for horror. I think that's one thing that most recent times have shown, because people don't read horror, because they don't the mollycoddle themselves. They want that excitement, so it's coming out in wrong ways. And like you said, people don't examine their dark thoughts. Where I have yet to speak to a horror writer or somebody who has a interest in horror or the darkness or a real dark sense of humour to be a bad person. Do you know what I mean? I've yet to meet one. Everyone has been absolutely delightful and lovely, and besides writing all this like crazy dark stuff and doing gnarly things to people, turning to be a really pleasant person. And that's maybe an advocate for horror, that if you dive into that world, actually will come out better.
Well, yeah, it's like there's this, I've heard it spoken of before, toxic positivity. It's like everybody like lecturing it. And then again, that veers into a horror thing, like with all the little cults of everybody, sweetness and light. And then, it morphs into something really dark because people don't want to admit it to themselves,
The Wicker Man, the original, not that horrible remake, but the original Wicker Man with Christopher Lee and Edward Woodward.
Yeah.
He's getting burnt alive with like livestock and like screaming in agony, and they're all singing, and dancing and like really happy. And you're like, that to me, that image just came straight in my mind from what you said. That's a world now. This forced politeness actually is leading people to do dark stuff, where I think it's better to imagine dark stuff and write about dark stuff and laugh at dark stuff. At least then you're not doing it.
Yeah, and also like on that same kind of vein was like Midsummer. I loved that movie.
I haven't seen that yet. I've been.
Oh, it's like kind of a cult like thing with like Wicker Man and Sweden, I think it is that. It's really really good, but but the weird thing is about that film, it's all filmed in the sun. So most horror films are filmed in the dark, and it just shows that it's almost like the sun itself, the year of, what Sweden has like sunshine all the time, and all these kind of progressively dark things are happening, and
Yeah, back home we always call them the good living person. They're good living. They don't drink. They don't smoke. They wouldn't do this. They're happily married for 20 years. Blah blah blah. And then you peel back the curtain and you find out they're the ones doing the gnarly stuff. And you're like, all right, okay. No, the reason I haven't watched that movie is because once again, it's fallen into this thing. Either if you like it, you're a good, virtuous, clever person, and if you don't like it, you're a horrible, bad, nasty troll that should live under a rock and not exist. And you're like, dude, it's a movie. Yeah, they like it or you don't, but why is it being formed into these two camps over a piece of entertainment?
Yeah, I think so. I think more people would benefit from depth psychology, I think. That people should really, I don't know, people all on the surface. They think they have to be like stereotypically happy and you still have all these ideas of success, and they fill all their dark emptiness with like either products or food or whatever, buying stuff all the time, and instead of examining what is there about me that is hungry inside, what do I want truly, you know? They don't acknowledge what am I afraid of. A lot of people don't ever think about what they're afraid of, and with me, it's like almost always in my thoughts.
I'm
It's
looking
like,
for the next thing. It's like, come
yeah,
on.
it's like I have to like sometimes it's hard to not think of dark thoughts, you know.
That's it. You just run into empty. But that's where horror, and that's why I personally love the genre. Is that's exactly what it does in every shape and form. It's poking at you to get you to look inside, because if it gives you a reaction, so if you read a psychological horror and you see somebody just completely falling apart and that unnerves you, then you read another psychological horror and that unnerves you too, then straight away you know you've got a fear of power and control within yourself, and there's something for you to
Hmm.
look at. If you're afraid of the monster, then is it your own mortality? Is it not being the apex predator? Is it the unknown? The more you find out what makes you tick, and I think the darkness, knowing what makes you afraid is as much, if not more important, than what makes you happy. Because if you know what you
Hmm.
don't like, then you can gravitate yourself towards what you do and what's going to give you a fulfilled life. And this is what this genre does. Actually, your story, the one we featured, Revenants, had a really great tone. God, I forget the character's name, but basically, she started out with a full life.
Yeah, the character doesn't actually have a
She
name
doesn't, right?
until
Okay, that's. So I'm a bit of a
and
scatterbrain, so that's why I always have to
well,
apologize in
she
advance.
gives herself a name or something, but yeah, and the Awakener, he doesn't reveal his true name either. So
No, and the restaurant scene actually is a perfect embodiment of that. That internal hunger that people don't know how to feed, or they don't even know what they're hungering for. So when the menu items are being set down, didn't know until the pumpkin. It's that
Mhm.
thing of, if you don't know what's going to upset you, if you don't know what actually you're yearning for or what you're afraid of, how can you live life? Because if you don't actually embrace all aspects of life, then you're an automaton.
Yeah, that scene with the pumpkin thing, that came from a dream too. And even one of the characters in the book, Morbidi Graham, that name came to me in a dream also. So yeah, I think dream work is really important in horror, you know.
That's something I haven't heard about in ages. No, dream interpretation. That used to be a massive thing, sort of mid 2000s. Like there was everybody was out interpreting dreams, or there's books upon books being produced about trying to discover what your dreams mean. That seems to have just completely vanished. Do you think that's part of this refusal to be introspective, or is it just run its course?
No, I think it's important everybody like examine their dreams. And like I've got a book of symbols. It's like symbols in art, symbols, and I look at it sometimes, and you see like what it means, and a lot of times I kind of believe in archetypes. I think there's a lot of things that people have been symbols have the same kind of general meanings throughout the centuries. Maybe it's just the way our minds work at associations or something. And
Interesting. Yeah, it's. I think we need to get back to that. Not so much navel gazing, but that hard look inside. I think if people we get more people turned around and into that, I think it can only be better. Well, I suppose you could. I kind of planned for this to be an hour or so. Are you okay for time?
yeah.
I don't want to. I don't want you to be like, oh, he's got me trapped here.
No, no, I've had a good time. I didn't know how long it would be, but
I,
yeah, this
I
is
kind of set aside
this
an
is
hour,
I
but
figured at
obviously,
least I figured at least an hour, and I figured, well, As long as it's not over an hour and a half, because I have a dinner reservation.
No, understood. That's what I thought I'd just check there, because last thing I want to do is hold you prisoner, and then this becomes a horror movie itself. He won't let me off the camera. So, just to wrap up, what projects are you currently working on right now? What's sort of in the pipeline?
What's in the pipeline? I'm still kind of, I have this little file cabinet full of all these things that I've started and working on. And one of the things I'm working on, I want to do a prequel to the Revenants and Toxicosis, which is kind of big.
We've lost you there. We've lost you now. Are we back? No.
Can't hear me
Yep,
now.
now we're back.
I was going to
So
say,
you're saying prequel to Toxicosis?
Prequel to the books, and it's going to be loosely based on some of the things I felt as a child and adolescence, and why her fantasies about vampires and other types of entities, and how it kind of shaped her life, and why she would be drawn to someone like the Awakener and that kind of thing. And it's gonna be like little montages of things in her life that have kind of like supernatural resonance to them. Yeah, so. But that's kind of hard to write, so I do a lot of short stories in the meantime.
Yeah, I have a whole bank of stuff, and it's like, yeah, I need to get the next idea out. Oh. That's alright, Will. We're back again. Just about, no. I think you've gone as well.
Yeah, it sound keeps cutting out. But
Alright, no worries. Well, I think that's a good time to wrap up, because I think we've been really lucky so far. This has been 90% seamless.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Folks, don't forget to check out Allison her work. I've put links in the description. I'll comment on this when it goes out onto YouTube, and I can do that underneath. Don't forget as well, check out the various segments of the Horrorific podcast. One of them's Horrorific Tales, where we feature authors like Alison and her works. So you can check them out, see who you like, and then make sure you support them. Also, we've got various other segments on the go now, where we just delve into all sorts of horror and celebrate independent creation. So, until next time, my friends, keep it creepy, keep it horrific.